Hey, welcome. I'm Connor Happer.
And I am Mitch Sherman.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're doing a podcast about Nebraska every day of the week. Why don't you join us?
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, Mitch, here we are. It's our maiden voyage. We are doing this thing. We've been I don't know, we haven't done a probably effective job at teasing it very much, but here we are. So we're just gonna let people go. And there's as you well know, there's a topic surrounding Nebraska football, Nebraska athletics every single day. So we figured let's take a couple minutes out of every day and talk about it and let other people in the conversation too.
I think that was by design, don't you, Connor? Like we didn't want to. We wanted to just keep this shrouded in mystery, and I didn't want to tease it too much. You know, there is a Twitter channel or a Twitter page that I started last week. You can go to Locked On NEB and get your whatever it is we decide to put out on Twitter about this show. But you said in the open there that we're gonna do this every day. Is that right?
Monday through Friday. We're going to do 5 a week. That's the plan anyway. And who knows, there might be some extra stuff that comes along here and there as well. But, you know, like we said, you guys know it better than anybody, listeners of this. There's something to talk about. Even if there's nothing to talk about, there's something to talk about. So we've cleared through, college basketball season now as we've moved into the next phase, and we've basically started to turn our attention ahead to spring football. Spring games coming up in a couple weeks. There'll be some baseball in here as well, but we'll have a little bit of everything in this thing. So that's where we're starting, and then we'll see what it evolves into.
So if somehow you're catching us for the first time and you're wondering who are these two guys that are talking to you or looking at you on YouTube, you can get to the YouTube channel that's also Locked On Nebraska on YouTube, and we'll post all of our episodes there. I am, as I said, Mitch Sherman. I've covered Nebraska football for 30 years or close to it to really date myself there. The last 5 years at The Athletic. And of course, I'm continuing to do that. You're continuing to do your radio job, your daytime show, 10 to 2 Central on 1620 The Zone. And we're just going to do this in the mornings and post these things in the mornings and have 20 or 30 minutes every day about what's pressing in Nebraska athletics. And, you know, Connor, I think the great thing and part of what attracted me to this idea is that it's about us, and it's about what we want to talk about. And some days we might not talk about what's on people's mind when it relates to Nebraska football. Wherever the show takes us is I think where we're going to go. And that's really what excites me as much as anything about doing this.
Yeah, Mitch, I mean, you've been coming on my show for as long as I've been at the Zone now. I've been doing a daily radio show in Nebraska for almost a decade now, which is kind of crazy when you combine my time in Lincoln and now my time in Omaha. And I imagine this podcast will go a lot like our conversations that we have on Wednesdays on my show, except for I'm not going to be interviewing you. We're just like, in some cases you're going to be interviewing me, which honestly I'm really excited about. We have a good back and forth, good relationship. So this will be really, really fun. And I'm excited to like just pick your brain every morning. It's awesome for me because I get to pick your brain every morning on stuff that, you know, I could potentially talk about on my show. Maybe I'll come up with a halfway decent, coherent thought every once in a while, and you end up writing about it or something. So we'll help each other out. So this will be really fun.
Right. And hopefully, you know, our content is just going to be smart and it's going to be fun. And at the top of this first show, speaking of fun, Connor, I know you were this previous weekend, you were out of town, but did you happen to catch any of Matt Rhule from his first Saturday media availability in Lincoln?
Yeah, I watched it all on the plane ride back. So it's always interesting to see what he goes really, really in depth on, and the story that he told about Bill Belichick and in his time around the program was interesting. And I know it's something that we're going to talk about on the show just a little bit today, but I mean, you mentioned it. The guy, I'm really interested in the idea that, Matt Rhule could stop Bill Belichick 3.5 hours into a meeting with the coaching staff and say, "Hey, you need anything? You need a water?" He's like, "No, thank you." It goes for another hour. So like the details of that, he went without a bathroom break.
Do you need to use the restroom? I think was Matt Rhule. He was pleading to Bill Belichick to use the restroom because Matt Rhule, all 49 years old of him, was suffering sitting there. But it was impossible for him to leave the room in the middle of Bill Belichick's 4.5-hour presentation for the Nebraska coaches and go use the restroom. So he hoped that the 60-something Bill Belichick, is he 70? He's close to it. He didn't need to use the restroom. No, he said, no, Matt, I'm fine.
no, Matt, I'm fine. But that's like, just imagine that football. It's not football 101, it's probably, hopefully a little advanced. Maybe it's a graduate level course, but I mean, those guys, Nebraska staff getting the opportunity to just sit around and that was Rhule's message. He was like, we're just going to sit here and we're not going to listen. He doesn't care about what you're doing. He doesn't really need to know about any of that stuff. So I want you to just get your notepad out, sit and listen for a while. And, that's like Oppenheimer plus some. So I don't know if I'd be locked in for all that 4.5 hours, but kudos to him because that's an advanced level course there from Coach Belichick.
It's probably a good idea. It's probably good advice from Matt Rhule to tell his coaches, don't tell him what you've done. Like Tony White, we know that people love you here in Nebraska and you're on top of this defensive thing, but Bill Belichick probably doesn't need to hear about that. So it's not really going to impress him that much. The other thing about Saturday, Connor, was the revelation that Nash Hutmacher and Terrence Knighton, Nebraska's defensive line coach, almost came to blows because Knighton wanted to keep Nash out of another drill, and they've been continuing to keep him out of practice for the first half of spring as he comes off wrestling season. And Nash apparently had enough of it and almost got into a fight with Coach Knighton. I proposed possibly that Pot Roast and Polar Bear should actually have a fight, and they could maybe sell tickets to it.
Yeah, they could wrestle. I mean, I don't know. I wonder what kind of wrestling shape Pot Roast is in, Terrence Knighton is in, because Nash is coming off a pretty nice little campaign there. And man, we've talked about this a little bit before, but like he's so trimmed down, Hutmacher. And he, his face just looks completely different. And he's one of those football guys where it's just like, yeah, it doesn't matter that I was, I think he approaches sports like he's playing as if he was 8 years old. Oh, I have a baseball game today and a basketball game at night, or flip those around. Sure, let's do it. I'll be ready for it. And that's to an extent the kind of guys you want, but also, he's been in college football for a long time now. So maybe it's best to kind of load manage those guys as much as you can. But I don't think Nash Hutmacher really likes that term very much, to be honest with you.
He doesn't need load management. I think Knighton would be an underdog, and I wouldn't bet against him in that fight. He's now that Nash is 285 and in wrestling weight, maybe 295, probably getting up close to 300. Pot Roast has got him outweighed, I think. So I might go in that direction, and he's got the experience on him too. So hey, we made it through one segment here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Please subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Locked On Nebraska. We also have email if you want to communicate with us. I've not accessed the email account yet, but I believe that it's there. That's also lockedonneb@gmail.com. We'll be back after this break to talk about a little breaking news.
Hey, it's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing. Mitch and I, both Royals fans, so there's some interested parties there as well. And that's why it's time for you to get locked in on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Why? Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets. That is guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything you want under the sun as we head into this interesting part of the sports calendar where there's a whole bunch of different stuff going on, but including, not limited to, Royals baseball. And you can do it all on an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. That is FanDuel Sportsbook. And we ask the question, what are you waiting for? All you have to do is head to FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an automatic win. That's right, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's all on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 streaming sports channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube and the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, so we have some breaking news as we're starting and we're recording this first episode. How amazing and perfect, how fitting that Nebraska has some news and some new stuff for us to discuss. And we want to talk about the stuff that you guys know is important on a day-to-day basis as well. So Monday was the last day in Nebraska athletics for Nebraska's CFO, Doug Ewald. He was the CFO under Trev Alberts. Those two were tied together. Obviously, Trev has left the building as of it's been a couple weeks now. And so we're moving forward now into an athletic department, Mitch, that is going to be shaped by their new athletic director. It still doesn't feel 100% like real yet. Maybe we haven't gone through a football season or all the trials that you need to in order for Troy Dannen to really feel like he's in it quite yet. I think there's this kind of phase where you're getting acclimated to things, but you won't have one of Trev's right-hand men there with him. And so there's a few things on that. Mitch, you wrote about it and reported it. I guess what's your immediate takeaway from that piece of news that we got today?
Yeah, change is going to happen when there's a move at the athletic director spot, and I think the higher up the food chain an administrator sits, the more likely it is that their job is going to be evaluated and reconsidered. And Doug Ewald was in that number 2 or number 3 position in the athletic department. You've got Marquita Armstead, the senior women's administrator, who was also brought in by Trev Alberts. She and Doug Ewald, they sat right below Trev in the on the organizational chart. So this is the kind of stuff that happens. It's tough because when an athletic director decides to move, there's all kinds of collateral impact, and this is one of those things. Doug Ewald is a lifelong Nebraskan and worked at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and at the University of Nebraska Med Center in finance and in business before he went to work for Trev Alberts just a few months after Trev took the job at Nebraska in 2021. And now he's out, and we'll see where Nebraska goes with this business part of its organization. I think it's possible that they could take it out of the athletic department entirely. We've seen oversight extend from the president's office, from Varner Hall over there on Holdridge Street in Lincoln, right down to Memorial Stadium. So if they're going to oversee the athletic director from the president's office, will they oversee the finances? Do the finances then come somewhat under the purvey of Chris Kaborik, who is the interim university system president, still today, awaiting the 30-day period for Jeffrey Gold to expire so he can take over on a full-time basis, and Kaborik can slide back into that CFO role. So yeah, that sounds kind of like the job that Doug Ewald did in athletics. So we'll see exactly how that goes. But I think that the main takeaway here is that there's more change coming to Nebraska athletics with the hire of Troy Dannen back on March 20th. And, it'll be interesting to see how far that extends. Connor, one of the big talking points since Dannen's hire has been the future of this Memorial Stadium project. And of course, when it comes to finances, that's pretty high on the list at $450 million. Dannen still has not made any kind of a declarative statement about what he wants to do with Trev Alberts' plan to renovate Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, I wonder when we might find out or get some sort of some sort of clue. It definitely seems to be at least on the back burner at this period of time, if not maybe more than that. But like, I thought what you said there highlighted an idea that I've been thinking about a lot over the last couple of weeks since Trev left for Texas A&M, which is basically, I mean, this job now, the AD job at Nebraska, it's vastly different than, Trev Alberts was running the athletic department in his vision. But remember all of the seeds that he kind of planted throughout his time here, and Nebraska's sort of acceptance of the NIL thing. They're going further into that now, but he was talking about making big. I mean, we were talking about making big hires for football coaches, firing a football coach, hiring a football coach, potentially firing a basketball coach. Ended up retaining him. That seemed to have worked out. There's nothing like that on the plate right now of Troy Dannen, and so a lot of those, like I said, seeds have kind of been planted, and I don't think it's it's not exactly just, hey, we're going to take this and we are going to just continue in Trev's vision. Troy Dannen's going to build it the way he wants to build it, but it is a different job, and it's further down whatever line and getting Nebraska, I think, back to kind of where they wanted to be organizationally. Now that you have something to build off of now, and that's the job that Troy Dannen inherits compared to what Trev Alberts does. So it'll be interesting to see how he builds his staff of his team around him in that image or whatever the job is now.
Yeah, this isn't a curveball necessarily that Troy Dannen has been dealt. I think he factored in the decision certainly for Doug Ewald to step aside, but he's inevitably going to get some curveballs, and that will be when the constituency, when the people of Nebraska, everyone who watches that athletic director's chair so closely, can begin to start to evaluate how fast on his feet Troy Dannen can act. And I would say my eyes perked up a bit early this week when John Calipari departed Kentucky for Arkansas, and one of the names that was listed in some media reports. And again, this is nothing that has legs or substance to it. There's always speculation about candidates anytime a job opens. But Fred Hoiberg's name, was on the list at Kentucky as someone who might get consideration. Now, I would put that as very much a long shot, but these things happen to an athletic director, and he's probably going to dodge that one. I don't think Dannen will have to deal with Fred Hoiberg going to Lexington, but something is going to come up, and it's probably going to come up fairly soon because that's the life of an AD at a Big Ten school.
Yeah, and he might be, where Trev, like, I don't know that Trev was really, obviously he's judged on, you're judged on the football hire, you're judged on the basketball hire, but there's a lot of the stuff that Trev Alberts was doing from an organizational standpoint, or, continuing on with the idea of the football facility that is, just now finally being completed. And then the initial vision on the stadium project, there was a lot of other stuff there. And now maybe Troy Dannen could be the guy to get it back to, like, okay, this is a little bit more of a normal, like we have coaches in place. Obviously, let's put the best pieces around them that we possibly can. But maybe you're talking about, and this hasn't happened in a long time, Mitch, maybe you're talking about that exact idea right there, which is fending off other schools from coming in and poaching your coaches. It says something about your school that if that happens, and it says something about Nebraska where it hasn't happened in a really long time now.
Did you hear Matt Rhule's comment on Saturday? Just one little comment in one of his answers about how he's a caretaker for the Nebraska football program, and he's only going to be here a short time, and he hopes that the next coach is on board with everything that he's brought in, and believes that Matt Rhule left this place in better than he found it. I found that slightly disconcerting to hear him even talking in that way. Now, again,
read into it a lot or not. Maybe that's if you're really like playing conspiracy theory hat, you're like, whoa, what's happening here? But if you want to ignore it, then you probably can still at this stage, which is nice.
Yeah, one way or another, Troy Dannen's going to have to deal with some stuff, and it's probably coming sooner rather than later. And I don't mean a premier coach leaving the program, and I don't necessarily mean something as I don't want to say minor, but something as manageable as like a star athlete getting in trouble. Something between those two things, like of a more seismic nature. But we'll get the opportunity to see how he handles it, and it'll be interesting to watch the reactions of Nebraskans. So after the break, we're going to get into a little bit of a conversation I had with Mike Minter, former Nebraska football star, and some thoughts that he's had on spending time around the program recently. All right, Connor. So one thing that I'd like to do with this podcast, and I know you mentioned in the first segment that you'd like to do with this podcast too, is to be able to highlight some of our work. And on Monday, I got a chance, as I mentioned before the break, to visit with Mike Minter, who was a second-round pick out of Nebraska in 1996, two-time national champion. He's been the head coach at Campbell, an FCS school, for the last 12 years. And he resigned in December in order to pursue some opportunities at the FBS level. And since that time, Mike Minter, who's 50 years old and has 4 kids in his 20s and is ready to write a new chapter in his career, has been traveling around some, mainly in the Carolinas. But he took a week and came to Lincoln, not to see Bill Belichick, but to spend time around Matt Rhule and his coaches, and to get a sense of what it's like at a Big Ten program, to observe, to see if working at a place like this, maybe at Nebraska, would be something that is potentially in his future. And we talked about a number of things. And one thing he said, I got around late in the interview to asking him about Dylan Raiola. And of course, in this first episode, we're going to bring up Dylan Raiola. Mike Minter, who is as respected a voice as you're going to get in, I think, the Nebraska universe, said that he believes in watching Dylan Raiola that Dylan is better than Patrick Mahomes was at this stage of his life and in his development. He then went on to tell me all about the great things that Patrick Mahomes has done and why he's done it, because of his work and how he continues to work. But that's some high praise from a respected voice for Nebraska's freshman quarterback, don't you think?
Yes. And as if we haven't made enough comparisons to Patrick Mahomes already, obvious why that one comes up. I mean, he's got all the way down to the hairdo, but it's interesting to hear a guy like that, like you said, with that much clout, that much respect, not only around Nebraska football, but in the NFL circles too, to say, yeah, I mean, paraphrasing here, but yeah, I see the comparison, and this guy's really, really advanced. Now, like, what does that all mean? I mean, to go back, if you go back to Patrick Mahomes when he was 18 or 19, he
wasn't a 5-star.
Exactly. Nobody knew that. Nobody knew that he was going to end up being Patrick Mahomes. So sometimes it's just circumstance and situational stuff that gets you to where you are. But obviously, you have to have a base level of talent as well. And it seems like Dylan's got that part. And that's a really good start. It's something like, it's as surefire from a talent perspective as anybody has ever been at that spot at Nebraska. So there's your start. And then, the hype train just kind of rolls on from here. If he can continue to check those boxes.
Yeah, I think this is one of those moments that we'll look back on and say, well, when did the Dylan hype start? And of course, the Dylan hype started when he was a freshman in high school and he came to Nebraska and lit up the Huskers Friday night lights, and everybody realized that it was Dominic's son. And soon enough, he was offered by Texas and Georgia, and that the hype train had left the building. But, we're in a completely different chapter of this now as he starts his career at Nebraska, and you see him in a Nebraska uniform out at practice, and he's in Memorial Stadium on a night at the end of mat drills with the lights on, competing. And soon enough, just a couple of weeks from now, he's going to be in Memorial Stadium on a Saturday afternoon, throwing the football around with the Big Ten Network cameras there. So I'm sure that the hype will completely stay realistic as we move forward. And it's like, here's April. And if you can't see me on YouTube, like I've got my hand down by my chest, and here's May, and now it's up by my shoulder. And like, let's go ahead to the end of July, like when Nebraska's about to start preseason football camp, and it's over my head. My hand is over my head at that point. So they have to be wary. They have to be wary about this.
But there's so much stuff going on. Like you have him, his obvious talent level, like the circumstances in which he was recruited, the fact that he is, a son of a legend at Nebraska. And so, like you said, that'll just keep the hype train going on and on and on. And then you get, Mike Minner saying that he's further along than Patrick Mahomes. And it's like, yeah, okay. I understand why, but you're also combining that with the situation that he walks into at Nebraska, which is, I don't know that there could be, coming off of last year, lower expectations or things that are accepted about quarterback play at Nebraska. Like you hit. Now, we've always been told to never say rock bottom, but it was rock bottom. Quarterback play was so bad for Nebraska last year. And so now you have this freshman who you're not, you don't want to go full in on the hype train on, but like part of you thinks that it just is guaranteed to be better. It will be better simply because you're going to have some competency in that spot. And there is time for him to grow into it because he has that requisite talent level. I mean, there's so many different things that are going up and down, including the program and its potential ascension as well.
If you think that it can't get worse, you're always wrong. It can always get worse. And if the last 7 years of Nebraska football has taught us anything, that's one thing that we've learned. Now, I don't think that's where Nebraska's going. So I hate to end it on that sour note, but we've reached the end of our maiden voyage, our first episode. We will have lots more this week and in the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure in the weeks after spring football on everything that's going on out on the practice field. On Tuesday, Nebraska will have an open session for the media to its practice session, and we will of course discuss that in our Wednesday morning episode. So thank you for listening. Please follow along on all of the podcast platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On NEB, and we will be back to talk with you tomorrow.
Hey, remember, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Use the Locked On Today channel.